Good evening, campers, dreamers, and babysitters, and welcome back to part 3 of our Terrifier series. This one, we are, of course, discussing the amazing, the incredible, the film that for us, honestly, I guess you could say, started it all, Terrifier 2.
Please welcome Art the Clown.
This was a huge surprise. We've recounted the story many, many times on this channel, so I don't think we need to go over it again. But this film affected us in a lot of ways. It's a very memorable night for us. It is something that we won't probably ever forget because it was a double feature of this and 2022's Hellraiser. And it was just, wow. Going into this film, we thought it's going to be just meh, all right. We're seeing it mostly just to get a review on the channel. Came out as one of our favorite slasher films. So Terrifier 2, it's incredible.
Absolutely. You know, going into that one, like you just said, it was kind of a review for the channel. We thought, man, you know, people talk about Terrifier. People like Terrifier. We checked out that first one because a lot of people liked it. We knew the second one was coming out. And it didn't really hit with us, as we talked about. And this one just became, well, let's go see it. Maybe not a lot of people are going to cover it. You know, we had to drive, 50 minutes away just to go check this one out. So we weren't sure, how many reviews were going to be up for it. And we just went just to check it out. Probably if the channel didn't exist, we never would have made the drive. We never would have checked it out. And it ended up in our top 10s of the year. And I remember sitting in the theater as we were watching this. And honestly, yes, it has the gore. It has everything that the original Terrifier has. But right off the bat, there's just so much character development. There's so much going on. It felt like an entirely different movie to me. Yes, it had those great beats of Art the Clown causing mayhem. But from a character perspective, this honestly is a completely different film.
It is. And I mean, we're going to dive deep into that because that's probably my favorite piece of this entire thing is just how Damien Leone tackled these characters and really brought some gravity to Terrifier 2, which is, I know, weird to say, but when you're coming off of films like All Hallows Eve and Terrifier, where, yeah, it's a lot of special effects that are pretty mind-blowing, that are pretty exciting, but they're so paper thin. They really don't have a lot going on as far as people we can relate to and get attached to. But Terrifier 2 is a complete 180. It almost feels like we've just about completed the full circle here. Like, as far as just trying to piece together this idea of what Art the Clown is and what Terrifier is as a slasher icon and a slasher franchise. And much more than that, honestly. Like, as things develop, we learn more about this character throughout the film, and it opens up more doors than I think it answers, which is so rare for a movie to do that and to still walk out feeling completely satisfied. That was such an odd experience.
Yeah, it was something where I guess I was not prepared for it. I knew going into it that this had a longer runtime and that I think there was an interview with Damien Leone after we had watched the entire film. So I knew we were going to be in that theater for a very long time, and we had a long drive back. And as we were watching it, as I sat down in the theater, I was like, oh, we just have to get through it. I wasn't anticipating enjoying it, but then as we got deeper and deeper into that film, it just became such a thrill ride because we were getting that gore, we were getting that mayhem, but we were getting this connective tissue with the story. And I honestly couldn't believe it. I couldn't believe that we were kind of doing this deep dive after that kill reel that we got of the initial Terrifier and that skimpy narrative, I guess you would say. There wasn't a lot there. And then we were really just kind of opening up different chapters with Sienna and Jonathan and a bunch of different characters and kind of throwing in, really leaning on the supernatural elements because, I just checked the box for All Hallows Eve as we were going through this. And, you get that supernatural feel toward the end of Terrifier with that last beat that we do get, but it's not overly supernatural in any sense. But as we get into Terrifier 2, we really do lean on those supernatural elements. We start kind of melding in that ultra violence, but also this kind of, I guess, maybe religious horror in a sense, which, as we talked about, it's a hard sell for us to really enjoy religious horror. And I think you look at Terrifier 2, oddly enough, and with that kind of element in here, probably one of the most unique religious horror, if you want to categorize it that, where you can really kind of just, you have this killer clown, but then you start adding in different elements. So, you know, oddly enough, as I was kind of reflecting on this, I said, I don't know if this fits in religious horror, but I think their case could be made.
I sure. I guess that's definitely I get the imagery, the iconography is totally there. And I mean when we're dealing with pulling strings from All Hallows Eve now and that we've freshly talked about it, we can do that where it's like we're dealing with things like the ninth circle of hell and all this stuff. So it's like, yeah, there's definitely some religious aspects being played into there, but I gotta say, like, I wouldn't necessarily consider this a religious horror film, but I could definitely see where it's getting pulled into it, and it's interesting. It's kind of like David Leone doesn't want to necessarily stray too far from his roots of throwing everything in there to see what sticks. You know what I mean? Like he kind of started off with a little bit of religious horror stuff with the Ninth Circle, and then kind of went more serial killer slashery, and now has kind of found a way to kind of marry the two. So that's a very interesting way of looking at it. Now, the big motivator for why we wanted to touch on this again, because like we said, we've already reviewed this film. We already reviewed Terrifier. The only one we didn't review on the channel at the time was All Hallows Eve. So why are we coming back to this? Well, Luke had pitched me an idea very early on this past year of just saying, we are in a position where we've interviewed so many independent filmmakers over the last 2 years. And for a while there, and I still think to this day, there's been this sentiment that gets played over and over again that Terrifier 2 opened a lot of doors for independent filmmakers and really changed the landscape of how theaters, especially theater chains, are looking at smaller films, especially smaller horror films. So, Luke, you want to kind of dive into a little bit more of that for the audience here?
Yeah. As we talk about Terrifier and kind of reflect on this as Terrifier 3 is coming out, I think, as we look at films like this that are smaller budgeted and have this limited release, and we've covered the a little bit on Hatchet. We never really dove deep into that, but like that film coming out in the mid 2000s and um not really having the outlet, I guess. Maybe it's a post pandemic thing. I'm not sure, but kind of finding these films to put into theaters as it's getting harder and harder to go out, especially after that whole pandemic issue. I think maybe Terrifier was a big kind of catalyst for that, I guess you would say, where Hatchet, beloved by a lot of horror fans, but never really got that due, I think, in the theatrical run where it was in and out. It came out on DVD and got your typical minor release as just probably a few hundred theaters. I didn't look that up, unfortunately. I do apologize, but as you look at Terrifier, this one got put in the theater. As I said, we had to rush out 50 minutes away just to be able to go check this one out, and it was only supposed to be out, I think, was it, did they say like just a
It was,
weekend or?
I have it right here in my notes. It was originally slated for a 1 weekend limited theatrical release, and it was supposed to go to Screambox shortly thereafter. But what it did in that weekend that blew their mind and kept them wanting the theaters requesting it to stay, it cracked the top 10 of the box office. It came in at number 10. Just in its domestic run, and this is just domestic. We didn't even consider when it finally got overseas and stuff. It grossed $10 million, which, for a lot of you guys, oh, okay, 10 million. That's kind of a flop, by big movie standards. Well, this movie only cost $250,000 to make, which most of it was crowdfunded, which again plays into why it's 2.5 hours almost, because Damien was at one point thought, because of the COVID-19 pandemic, which we'll touch on, he wasn't going to get to finish it. He wanted to make sure everybody got what they paid for. But 10 million on $250,000. That, if you look at it and do the math, which I didn't do this, I won't take credit for it. It's already in the notes here. I pulled it. I think this came off IMDb, but it's 3,900% return on investment.
which is
That is absolutely astronomical.
it's something that I don't think anyone really could have bet on. You don't throw your chips in and say, I'm going all in on Terrifier 2. I don't think anyone, there are hardcore fans out there, but I don't think they would have been able to, you know, foresee the effect that Terrifier was going to have on the box office, because there have been so many smaller films like that have come out, but again, beloved by the horror community, but they don't do big numbers like that. But as you look at Terrifier and put that under the microscope, there's just something unique, something so different here, and it really kicked open the door for a lot of smaller horror. As we look at Skinamarink, that had come out, what was that, end of 2022 into 2023, I believe.
So yeah, technically it had its festival run at the end of 2022 and then went into 2023 following what Kyle Edward Ball coined, saying, I think the IFC producer said, was the Terrifier 2 method. So, and it also worked very successfully for them. They had an even smaller budget and they made like, I think 5 million at the box office when all was said and done. Absolutely insane.
Which, I think that kind of put the spotlight on these smaller films for these theaters, production companies, things like that, to really start putting their chips and say, I'm going all in on independent horror and see what it's going to produce, because you're just investing small numbers and then getting huge returns on those. And of course, we've seen that, in the 80s. That's why there's so many Friday the 13th of smaller budgeted films, and we got big returns. But I think something got lost along the way. It became a lot of the horror that we were seeing was more studio produced, generic general audience horror. And then as we get deeper into it, just after Terrifier 2 had come out, there are so many films that are now getting those theatrical releases that we never would have guessed that would have, stuck around for one weekend, let alone five, 6, 7, whatever you want to say, and are just doing bigger numbers, bigger returns, and are just getting out there to a general audience.
It's amazing to me because yes, a lot of these are like considered fathom events, especially here in the States. But you can see this method has been played on over and over again. Fuzz on the Lens would go on to do the exact same method with The Mean One. And The Mean One went and grossed a ton of money and stayed all through Christmas that year, which is, again, incredible to see. It's awesome. And then you would have Winnie the Pooh, Blood and Honey, for say what you will about that first one. Again, it stayed in theaters. It made enough money to where they came back, made a sequel with more money that was actually good, that was actually full of inventive kills and excitement. So you can see why this has become the trend, I guess you could say, since Terrifier 2 came out, which it's, again, not anything groundbreaking. It's not anything that we haven't seen before. You brought it up, but that's how it was in the 80s. But Hollywood, from an outsider's perspective, from people who, we talk about numbers, we talk about, box office stuff all the time, just in our personal lives. But like, you can see almost this like circular kind of thinking that they do where they're almost going around the globe, around the map, or like around a Candyland board where it's like, okay, they start off, Monopoly board is better. They start off, doing their thing. They're collecting real estate. They're doing well by releasing, inventive, pushing the envelope horror films on small budgets. And then those budgets get bigger and bigger and bigger, and they just let it run until finally they're throwing, $30 million at a horror film that has completely lost its identity, and then nobody's showing up for it anymore, and they're just losing it. It's like they have to be kind of woken up every couple, like every other decade or so, to just kind of be like, okay, let's go back and give some of the smaller teams a bit more of a, a push. And I think a big part of that, and why we're seeing it stick around and why we're seeing it kind of last a bit longer now, comes down to the COVID-19 pandemic, because that affected Terrifier 2 in more ways than just its box office and its approach. The whole thing with this, which we'll get into kills and stuff here in a second, but there were so many effects, so many things. One standout kill scene that I did a whole solo video on, which I'll link right here up top. But that kill scene was extended once the COVID-19 pandemic hit and everything got shut down. They had a whole different idea for that. They had a whole different idea for many of these effects, but because there was downtime, Damien Leone just sunk his own money and his own time and his own effort into those effects. And that's why they stand out. And that's why they are so unbelievably shocking.
Certainly, certainly. And I think looking at that, the pandemic and the effect that that had on studios, just creativity and the films that were coming out. We did a video, I don't know how long ago it was. We talked about Blumhouse, kind of the state of Blumhouse and where they had initially come from with films like Sinister, and how those were kind of unique, where smaller budgeted. Scott Derrickson had a particular idea and really wanted to go with it, and you could feel that creative voice. But then somewhere along the line, Blumhouse kind of maybe lost its identity some, where it just becomes more so general audience horror. And as you were talking about, where studios tend to pump more and more money into these films, where it's before it's you have a long leash of we're only dumping so much into this. It's not nothing big. It's not a big budget. So if you have a vision, we trust you. Go on, do your thing. We didn't put too much time, money into this, so it's not gonna be a big deal if we don't see a return. But as we're pumping more and more money into it, we're also giving you more creative parameters of, this is what works, this is what we've seen works. So this is what we want you to do. So it kind of becomes not such a unique voice, it becomes more so cookie cutter, where we've seen this before, this jump scare, that jump scare. So looking at the pandemic and coming out of the pandemic, where I remember seeing so many articles. We still see some pop up today of, are theaters dead? Are people really going to go back to the theater to check out films? And I think looking at that, you really have to put these smaller films on the microscope and say, is this something unique? Is this a different voice? And looking at Terrifier 2, we have similar films, I guess, in terms of ultra violence and things like that. But Art the Clown was someone that you could latch on to and have some fun with, in terms of that mayhem and gore and just kind of that performance from David Howard Thornton. So it really did offer something that we don't see necessarily a lot from certainly big studios. So looking at that, I think that became the catalyst to say Terrifier 2 was unique enough to produce that type of return. And we want to get people out to the theater. So what else can we do that's going to be creative enough and unique enough that are going to certainly want people to come out to the theater, whether Fathom events or not? Maybe we can extend that weekend by 2 more weeks or 3 more weeks and get an even bigger return. And that's giving these smaller films the opportunity to go out there and say, "Hey, I have this idea." Damon Leone said that first film, proof of concept. This is what I want to do with Art the Clown. Just give me the opportunity to do it. And that's what he did with Terrifier 2. And of course, we're here anticipating Terrifier 3. So it's looking at those smaller films now and saying, there's a creative idea here. Let's go with it. Let's run with it and see what it can produce.
Absolutely. And, looking into some of my notes here, there are a lot of things that Damien Leone did that's really not breaking the mold. He's not doing anything that's, that different, that like, out of the box. This guy was working part-time jobs in February of 2019 when he sat down to start writing this, officially getting the full script. Once he knew he had a little bit of funding and they were going to crowdfund the rest of it, he spent 3 consecutive months every day coming to his computer and writing Terrifier 2. And he just pieced it together. He would spend his off time, his working days, listening to screenwriters talking about screenwriting. He'd read books about screenwriting. And that's all he did because he had one particular goal in mind. And I admire him so much for this because this is what everybody who's hungry to make something special in filmmaking does. He wanted to make characters that were just as popular as Art the Clown, but not, obviously slasher killers. He wanted them to be people. And I admire that so much because, again, the creation of Sienna Shaw, I don't know what it was, but like after about 10 minutes of her on screen, I think just after the dinner sequence with her mom and brother, I just sat there and said, "Oh my god, this Sienna girl, she's really good. Like this Lauren Lavera, she's pretty awesome. Like I really dig her character. She's like really realistic. She's holding her own. These conversations don't feel jokey or hokey or underwritten. They feel very natural. And I just kind of fell in love with her and Jonathan and their mom and just the dynamics and everything. It felt very 80s horror. It just kind of pulled me in like in a very natural way.
Yeah, the character work here is something that feels so authentic, and I think you're looking for that authenticism when you're trying to be part of the group or go on this journey with these characters. And I think that's an essential building block that I think some bigger films have really lost along the way, where it becomes we got to throw a joke in here, we got to throw a joke in here because that's what people are going to find funny, or you got to shoehorn in some modern lingo, and so that's going to resonate with a younger audience, but it just feels hollow. It doesn't feel authentic. It feels so forced, and I think that takes an audience out. Whereas this, um, with Sienna, I mean, it hit every beat that you would want to in terms of going on that journey with this character. And honestly, when you look at Art the Clown and you're looking for a character to rival Art the Clown's popularity, that's a tall task. So, I think it probably went into a lot of second guessing in terms of, as a person that listens to a lot of screenwriting podcasts and reads books, where, you always think, is this authentic enough? Does this come off natural? And of course, that comes to acting ability, that comes to the writing. It all has to come together correctly. And I'll say Terrifier 2 with Sienna absolutely came together completely right, because as we look in the past probably 20 years, there hasn't been too many long standing final girls. And I guess final girls that you put up with the icons, the ones that we've seen, the Laurie Strodes. Um, so looking at Sienna, that is a huge accomplishment, because that's someone where, hey, we get merchandise. You're wearing a Terrifier 2 shirt right now, and there's many with Art the Clown on. There's some that are centered around Sienna. You don't see that
Yep.
often, where it's always the actual killer, not the final girl, final boy, whatever you want to say. But we do have merchandise with Sienna's face on it now. So I think that's a true testament to what Damien Leone was able to accomplish when writing this character, finding a character that's going to resonate with an audience.
Yeah, and I don't know what it is, man. I will always remember my experience of sitting down and watching this film for the first time for the reasons more so than just what the night turned into, but it was one of those very few horror films that felt transformative. I know a lot of people for some reason in our comments will disagree with us, but I felt that with Barbarian. Barbarian took me on a ride. Terrifier 2 did a very similar thing, and it was just the feeling of, oh my god, I'm witnessing something special. I'm really witnessing the birth of a Laurie Strode. I'm really witnessing, an icon like Art the Clown come into his own. And the fact that they were able to not only present us with great characters, but really shake the world, shock the world with just these kills that are unlike some things we've ever seen on screen before, especially the bedroom scene, which again, I will hint, I have a link already in the description up probably at the end of this video. I have done a full breakdown with a little series that I do want to get back up and running called The Scenes That Scarred Us. It just takes a lot to get those videos made. And I went through piece by piece how they assembled that bedroom kill scene with Allie. And it's a feat. It is a masterwork of practical special effects. I mean, they started off with a very basic, brutal kind of kill. And with the COVID-19 pandemic, they were able to go back and keep adding and keep testing and keep adding and adding and adding. And then eventually we have this entire set with little tubes coming out of the walls for a puppet and blood shooting out of everywhere. It's incredible stuff. And the effect is ungodly. Like it is absolutely you turn Terrifier 2 on to shock people with this scene. Like that is my go-to You want to see something fucked up? I go to this scene.
Yes, and we talked about the original Terrifier, and you have that being sawed in half, and how that's such a talking point, a centerpiece of that film. And then you go into the bedroom scene with Terrifier 2, and that became a very much a big talking point. I think maybe even more so than that scene in
Oh
the
yeah.
original Terrifier. Maybe it was because of how social media is at the time, but that got eyes on Terrifier 2 a lot, and I think uncovering that actual film, going in for that scene, but then finding out so much character work's going on here, so much deep rooted stories going on here that is, you know, opening up more questions than giving you any sort of answers. And just building that intrigue to that third installment that we're seeing here, and the giant wave that we're getting, this wave of everyone gravitating toward Art the Clown. And as I said, we had to drive 50 minutes away to go see Terrifier 2, not that far for Terrifier 3. So the audience is there. The theaters are opening up for Art the Clown. I think Terrifier 2, that practical effects there, that bedroom scene really brought in an audience, but they stayed for the actual character work and what we were going to get in that third installment. And I got to say, there are so many more people talking about Art the Clown and Terrifier as of today than there were 2 years ago. It's very interesting to see because there are people that are just, I would deem not deep rooted into the horror community like we are, but they're aware of Art the Clown, and they've talked about Terrifier. They've seen him on TikTok. They've seen not necessarily the entire films, but they've seen clips. They are aware of Art the Clown. Very interesting time right now because a lot of people are interested in seeing Terrifier 3 and not knowing what to expect, which could be a very, very interesting dynamic.
And that's what it is, man. I mean, we have literally witnessed the birth and the becoming of not just one, but two icons with a final girl and a new slasher. Now, again, I have to give all the credit in the world to the folks who saw that spark in Terrifier, and even more to the folks who saw the spark in All Hallows Eve and pushed us to this point. We're late adopters to this franchise. We have only gotten on the bandwagon since two. There is a reason that this film is so special to us. It is my favorite of the three films that we're talking about here, not including the most recent one that is upon us. So it's just it's something that there will be purists who will probably give us shit, but I think the beauty of it, especially with groups like the Art the Clown Film Society, it's like so many people are just excited to have a franchise like this again. Something that feels like how it probably felt to go see Nightmare on Elm Street 3 or go see, Friday the 13th Part 4, and just like, going there knowing like, oh my God, this is going to be something crazy. It's going to be cool. It's going to be awesome. Like we have that again with Terrifier. And I just hope to soak it up as much as possible while it's still here.
Yes, it's certainly an interesting time. I'm very excited. I know we opened this up, and I mentioned religious horror, and you don't necessarily have to seclude this to a box of religious horror. And I think looking at that, that's the beauty of Terrifier 2. It doesn't necessarily just check the box of religious horror, slasher, supernatural horror because it doesn't seclude itself. It somehow checks all the boxes, but doesn't feel just like one thing at all. I think that Terrifier as a franchise is bursting with creativity. When you look at that first one, it can be misrepresented, especially if you haven't seen the second one, as just, a kill reel of a gore fest of just ultra violence, which that one certainly is. It's almost a best of, but as you get into Terrifier 2 here, it really does open up that story. It starts using the versatility of the horror realm of, hey, let's pull a little bit from each different subgenre and somehow meld this into a perfect harmony of violence and mayhem. And that's what they do here with Terrifier 2. I can't wait to see how they expand upon the symphony of violence in Terrifier 3 and see what they're going to bring us, because I'm certainly excited. Everything that we've seen from the previews, from the little tidbits of news from different fests and things like that. Rather intriguing. So I think they're going to bring us something new, something different, something fresh, and really please the Terrifier audience.
100%, 100%, sir. But yeah, guys, that's everything I think we're going to touch on for Terrifier 2 at the moment. Obviously, being big fans won't be the last time we revisit this topic. I'm sure we'll have lots to discuss and a lot more a bit sooner than we thought. As we're sitting here, and I feel comfortable enough to say this now, um, I've seen Terrifier 3. Luke is getting off of this video to watch Terrifier 3. And that means that our review will be posted. If we get permission to do it sooner, we will. But it will be posted on Wednesday, that is October 9th. So we'll be able to gush and give you just our initial thoughts on Terrifier 3 and what we think the continuation of this franchise has been. I want to thank the folks over at Cineverse, Screenbox, everybody who just was able to give us this opportunity. We have a lot of really fun stuff planned for this weekend. It's going to be a crazy, crazy week. Not only that, but we are, of course, as we are known to do, doing a spoiler heavy discussion releasing this upcoming Sunday on Terrifier 3. So you'll be able to sit down with us after seeing the film, discuss all the things that you'll learn and all the things that happen. And I'm excited to get there. And I'm excited for you guys to see this. And boy, howdy, I am even more excited after seeing the film for Thursday night to witness this with an audience and just feel the hum of that theater, man. Because I tell you what, it's going to be wild.
I'm so excited. I'm excited to see it here. Getting lucky enough to see a screener of this, but I'm even more excited to go enjoy this with an audience because that first experience with Terrifier 2 in the theaters, there's nothing like it.
Nope.
I'm hoping Terrifier 3 will match that experience as well, just because, again, all the tidbits, all the little previews that we've gotten, I can't wait to see this with a group of people and see the outcome.
And I can tell you, I think that the thing that will make this basically like an Avengers movie back when they were good, like with Endgame and everything, is that we're seeing it opening night. Our theater is like packed to the gills right now. It's not sold out, but it's getting there. And you just know that every single person that we're going to be sitting with is a Terrifier fan, is a fucking horror fan. It is going to be literally people hooting and hollering. I cannot wait. It's been so long since I've had an experience like that, probably since Endgame. So like I am thrilled to be like getting there for it. We've got, of course, our Art the Clown Christmas tree sunglasses. We will be there. And I guess we're not really doxing ourselves, but when you see this video, if you live in the Ohio area, if you live out near Valley View, Independence, there, we're going to be going to the Cinemark there at 8 p.m. Stop on by. If you see us in the lobby, you see us in the theater, stop us, say what's up. We'd love to chat with you. If any of you Terrifier fans are going, we'll be there. So yeah, man, it's going to be insane. I cannot wait. So that's going to wrap us up here. Luke, do you have anything else for the fun folks, or are we good?
I think we're good. I'm excited. I'm still waiting on those popcorn buckets. They won't be here for a few more months, but hey, we got them. So
I absolutely agree. And I want to buy one of those ones that people are making. Have you seen what these
oh
Terrifier fans are doing?
my gosh.
They're
I'll tell you what, bursting with
glorious.
creativity. Oh my gosh.
Holy hell. They're literally taking
Beautiful.
the idea that the petition pitched with it being a severed head with the brain.
Yes.
Perfect. Perfect. I want to get one. I hope they make them long after the film comes out because I just don't have 150 extra bucks on me, but I just want one in my background so bad.
Oh my
So
gosh, that'd be a great centerpiece.
it would. But hey guys, we're just gonna keep geeking. So yeah, enjoy this, enjoy Terrifier, and stay tuned because Terrifier 3 review right around the corner. Alrighty guys, until next time, I'm Dylan Newell.
And I'm Luke Janesco.
And remember, stay scared.
Do the hard shit, gonna do it live. Cause Splattercast kick it every day they live. Splattercast, we slash ass. Splattercast, we slash ass. Splattercast, we slash ass. Splattercast, we slash ass.